During the time of Moses, Egyptian society was highly stratified, and Pharaoh ruled over the land as a proud and arrogant king who considered himself a god on earth and whose word was divine law. This situation caused Pharaoh to ignore the message of Moses, who had been sent by God to guide the people to the religion of monotheism and free the Israelites from slavery. Although Pharaoh witnessed many miracles performed by Moses, he was stubborn and did not accept the truth. Finally, God sent a series of plagues to Egypt to weaken Pharaoh's resolve and demonstrate his superior power. If you agree, come and see what happened in Egypt on this heartbreaking journey. You will definitely be amazed by what you have heard at the end of this video. In the heart of ancient Egypt, a civilization flourished with the Nile River as its lifeblood. This magnificent and prosperous river was the cornerstone of the Pharaoh's empire. But an unexpected event is about to occur here, an event that will leave a heartbreaking mark on history. While the sun shone its golden rays on the earth, the Egyptians felt very secure living in the kingdom of Pharaoh, who called himself God. But one day, everything was going to change. Pharaoh saw himself as God and ruled with an iron fist. The Israelites were in bondage as oppressed slaves under his rule. In the midst of all this suffering and despair, a man named Moses was chosen by God Almighty to deliver God's message to Pharaoh and save his people from captivity. Moses, a man of faith and unwavering will, went to Pharaoh and told him to release the Israelites from their chains. If you do not do so, you will face the wrath of God. Pharaoh, whose heart was hardened by arrogance, ignored Moses' message and rejected him without hesitation. But Pharaoh did not know that his stubbornness would lead to a series of disasters that would shake the foundations of his empire. The end of the myth of the Nile. The first of these plagues is one of the most terrifying and unprecedented. As the promised day approached, the sky turned an ominous red, heralding a terrible event. The sparkling waters of the Nile, the life-giving river that flowed through the heart of Egypt, began to change before the eyes of the terrified people. The transformation was so swift and merciless, the once life-giving blue waters turned to a dark, viscous liquid. Thick, blood-red waves began to move before the eyes of the terrified people. The change in the essence of the river was not just a change in color, but the water itself had actually turned to blood. This horrific event was a form of revenge on Pharaoh for enslaving the Israelites. The lush banks of the Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt's agriculture and prosperity, had now become something that seemed like a nightmare. An unpleasant odor permeated the air, accompanied by a suffocating fog that seemed to have permeated every corner of the earth. The screams of the dying fish filled the air with a terrifying and heartbreaking melody. The Egyptians, once so proud and self-confident, fell to their knees before this horrific sight. They said that they were terrified by the divine punishment that had descended on their land. The transformation of the Nile River was a clear message to Pharaoh and his people. It was a warning from God Almighty, and, most importantly, a wake-up call for the other plagues. Now, the plagues would continue, one after the other. From the depths of the Nile, an insidious threat was now emerging. The sound of the reeds, which at first seemed like a whisper, soon became a terrible and ominous sound that echoed throughout the country. The Egyptians were about to face the second divine punishment, the invasion of frogs. The sun was setting on the riverbank, casting long shadows. As darkness approached, the waters began to splatter and splash, heralding the arrival of a relentless army of frogs. The frogs that began to spread from the river spread like a relentless wave of terror throughout the country.
These were no ordinary frogs. They were large, bloated creatures whose warty skin glistened in the sunlight and whose bulging, bloodshot eyes struck fear into the hearts of the Egyptians. As the army of frogs grew larger, palaces, bustling markets, temples, and humble homes were attacked. They even attacked cornfields, and with each pause the foundations of the corn harvest were shaken, and the people's faith in the Pharaoh waned. Frogs were everywhere, attacking people's food, water, beds, and even clothes. Their noise became a noise pollution that prevented anyone from sleeping peacefully at night. Whispers of suspicion had begun among the people in the face of unbearable torment. Was the Pharaoh, whom the Egyptians worshipped as a living god, really as invincible as he was? After the frog attack, the Egyptians tried to return to normal, unaware that more trouble and torment were on the way. People cleared the remains of the frogs from their homes and streets. The once prosperous land was now devastated. The air was filled with an atmosphere of fear and despair that prepared people for the unknown. As the sun set, the red horizon turned to shadow. The air was so still that it seemed as if the world itself had held its breath in anticipation. A faint murmur, barely audible at first, began to fill the air, becoming an ominous murmur that penetrated the minds of the Egyptians. From every nook and cranny of the earth to the desert sands, a seemingly endless swarm of lice appeared, covering the land in a turbulent cloud. The lice formed a dark expanse of unimaginable dimensions. The lice invaded everything, covering every surface and invading every corner of the kingdom. The Egyptians felt that the insects had penetrated their clothes and ears, feasting on their blood, causing a maddening itch that left deep wounds. The Pharaoh had once been the symbol of power and glory of a kingdom, but now the mosquitoes had no mercy even on his clothes. He walked the corridors of the palace, writhing in an itch that nothing could satisfy. But Pharaoh was not about to give up his pride, so God sent a new plague. The Egyptians, stunned by the relentless swarms of mosquitoes, found the sky looking ominous. With a deafening roar, darkness began to advance across the sky. This time, a vast army of flies appeared, determined to devour everything in their path. Pharaoh, who was stationed in his palace, witnessed the chaos with surprise and anger. His hardened heart still refused to accept the divine religion of Moses, and so the Egyptians had to suffer the terror of the flies. The plagues did not end. Just as everything was ending, a new plague began. Little did they know that a plague was coming that would strike at the heart of their livelihood. As time passed, an ominous silence fell over the countryside. A curtain of fear and the corpses of animals that had perished in the streets had gripped Egypt. The lifeless bodies of sheep, goats, and cattle were piled up in the fields. The living creatures that had once been vital to the prosperity and survival of the people were now caught in the cold embrace of death. Everything was destroyed in a matter of minutes. But Pharaoh's heart, which seemed to be made of stone, did not move. He continued to wrestle with God, refusing to bow down to the relentless onslaught of plagues. The glorious civilization of Egypt was crumbling under the weight of divine punishment, and the Egyptians could not foresee the magnitude of the suffering that lay ahead of them, for God had decreed the fulfillment of the next plagues. As the sun scorched the ruined landscape of Egypt, an unknown disease spread like fire among the people. It began as a maddening itching sensation that grew under the skin with each passing hour. People shaved and clawed their flesh to cure the disease, but their efforts only served to aggravate the disease. Unbearable sores, like molten lava erupting from the earth, erupted from the skin, tormenting the afflicted. Screams echoed like a terrible symphony throughout the dying Pharaoh's kingdom. The plague had afflicted everyone, from the lowest slave to the highest official, and even Pharaoh himself, whose beautiful face was now disfigured and stained. Yet even as his kingdom burned in the fire of God's wrath, he would not give up. He was determined to keep the Israelites in his iron grip. After this plague was over, a new plague was on the way. The sky darkened and the wind began to howl.
With a thunderous explosion that shook the foundations of the world, the heavens opened and hail began to fall. Houses, temples, and historical monuments were destroyed in the blink of an eye by heavy hail. After the hail, fire began to fall. Fireballs fell from the sky, burning everything they touched. After the plague of hail and fire, it was now the turn of the locusts. Crops that had somehow survived the storm, hail, and fire were devoured by the locusts. The Egyptians watched in horror as their livelihoods were being destroyed by the relentless attacks of the locusts. Their thriving fields were now plundered to the bone. But Pharaoh had not given up yet. He was reluctantly determined to surrender to God Moses and free the Israelites from captivity. The plagues had reached their peak. Ominous sounds had become commonplace for the people. A cold, heavy atmosphere filled with the essence of darkness reigned over Egypt. Then the sun went out in the blink of an eye, and there was not even the slightest ray of light. For 3 days and 3 nights, darkness gripped the kingdom of Egypt in its cold grip. The people gathered together in fear and told each other what was going on in their minds. The lives of the Egyptian people were like candles going out. Finally, Pharaoh surrendered to God and decided to free the Israelites and exile them from Egypt. Every disaster that appeared in Egypt targeted different aspects of Egyptian society and the world's trust in Pharaoh. After enduring 10 plagues, Pharaoh surrendered, but decided to follow the caravan of Prophet Moses with an army and massacre them. At this time, Prophet Moses, by the will of God, divided the Red Sea in two and led his people across the sea and drowned Pharaoh's armies in the sea. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you are interested in this style of videos, be sure to subscribe to our channel and stay with us in the next videos.